Shalom and welcome to 2 Minutes of Torah. This year is entitled Parshat Ripple Effects. Simple question. A person goes ahead and does something wrong, acts improperly. For example, a husband comes home, doesn't talk to his wife nicely, in an appropriate way, is not makbid on his time, doesn't come home on time. He comes home and the first thing he does, spends time on the computer. Instead of spending quality time with his family, instead of going to the base medrash, having a night seder, and he acts improperly. Not a great model for his children. And years later, his children grow up, and they act the same way. And they do not act as wonderful husbands. They don't go ahead and not eating the Torah. They're not sitting and learning, having times to learn like they should, etc., etc. So for sure, the father, 20 to 30 years earlier, is responsible for his behavior. And when he's sitting in the Beit Shalmala, he has to answer why did he act that way? The question is, what about the effects he had on his children? So this question is not just a question of this specific case, but in general, ripple effects, both in a negative way and a positive way. What responsibility does a person have for the ripple effects of his behavior, both in a good way and in a bad way? So there's an interesting lesson we can learn from this week's Parsha. What do we have from this week's Parsha? Parsha Spalotcha. So Rashi says in Parshat that why doesn't the Torah record, chapter 10 talks about Pesach, Korban Pesach, why is it recorded at the very beginning of Bamidbar when it first happened? So Rashi says, Ein mukdamu Torah. Torah is not necessarily in chronological order. He says, yes, the Torah did not want to record the opening of Bamidbar with the sad event. What was sad? They only brought the Korban Pesach this one time in the Midbar. So Tosfos in Kedushin says, well, what was the problem with that? How is that a gnut? How's that a criticism of the Jewish people? They couldn't. They were they were traveling day to day. They didn't know when they were going to pick up. They could not do Brit Milah, and therefore they didn't have the right conditions for Brit Milah, and they're considered an Ariel, and Ariel cannot go ahead and bring a Korban Pesach. So they were just honest. They were stuck. So Tosfos says, yes, but why were they in the Midbar wandering around? He says, because they were involved in the Ched Meraglim. And that, of course, was their fault. So it turns out a very serious issue here. They spoke badly about the land, and therefore they didn't go into Eretz Yisrael. Because they didn't go to Eretz Yisrael, they were in the Midbar. Because they were in the Midbar, they were wandering around. Because they were wandering around, they couldn't do Brit Milah. Because they couldn't do Brit Milah, they could not go ahead and bring the Korban Pesach. So it was very indirect. Their sin at Meraglim had nothing to do directly with the Korban Pesach. Yes, but of course, it was a ripple effect. And Tosfos is saying in Kedushin, Lam Zayin Amud Bet, that was considered a good nut for them. So we learn a tremendous lesson, a scary lesson here, that a person really is responsible for his decisions and the ramifications of his decisions as well. This, of course, in the Chiddushei HaLev, Rav Leibowitz points out this goes for, of course, good and for bad. A person goes out and does some good acts, and that has beneficial ripple effects, and he has a zechut as well, zechuyot for that as well. So it's a very, very important lesson that we have to pick up in terms of a person's responsibility and the ramifications. It's huge, and there should be an extra motivation. Of course, when we do something right, or we avoid doing something wrong, of course, we hopefully do it l'shma. But an additional motivation could be that when we do something right, do something wrong, we could be responsible for effects that could go on for generations. And hopefully, as a motivation for us, that also should help us do the right actions and avoid the wrong actions as well. Shalom.